They say that every soul is born in light, but what they forget to mention is that light has shadows, and shadows speak. It was a rainy night when I first heard the whisper. I was 11. The storm outside howled like an ancient beast awakened from centuries of silence. And my room, once a sanctuary of soft toys and comic books, suddenly felt like a temple on the edge of something far more ancient than childhood. The voice came from the mirror. Not loud, not frightening, just knowing. You will choose one day, it said, but not yet. I never told anyone. Who would believe a boy who heard whispers from the mirror? But from that moment, I started seeing things differently, not with fear, but with a question that wrapped itself around my thoughts like ivy. What if good and evil weren't outside of us, but within? Years passed, the voice faded, but the memory didn't. I became a man. I chased success, built a company, shook hands with people who wore masks better than they wore suits. And in that world, fast, sharp, glittering, I met angels and demons in the faces of colleagues, mentors, and sometimes, in the mirror again. Because here's the truth no one teaches in business school. Every decision is a battlefield. Every opportunity comes with a price. And sometimes, to rise, you have to kneel before something darker than failure, compromise. This story isn't just mine. It's yours too. It's the story of Daniel, an ambitious entrepreneur whose life was a climb from nothing to everything. But along the way, he'd have to confront not just market crashes, betrayal, and impossible choices, but also the ancient forces whispering inside him. One voice called him toward light, ethics, compassion, purpose. The other, toward power, control, legacy. He thought he was choosing strategies. He was really choosing sides. And now, as we walk beside Daniel through his rise and fall, we will see a world hidden behind every handshake, every broken promise, every sleepless night, the realm of angels and demons, not winged creatures of myth, but forces woven into our every action. This is not just a story. This is a mirror, and it's whispering again. You will choose. Daniel sat at the edge of his desk, the dim light of the lamp casting long shadows across the room. It was a small office, cluttered with papers, half-drunk cups of coffee, and unopened emails. Outside, the world seemed alive with energy, businesses hustling, people bustling down the streets, all chasing success. He, too, had been part of that frantic race. But tonight was different. The feeling had been growing in him for months now, a gnawing sense of unease. A quiet whisper in the back of his mind. What if all this, the startup, the investors, the deals, wasn't what it seemed? What if it was all just smoke and mirrors? Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the framed photo on the wall across from him. It was a picture of his younger self, standing beside his father in front of their modest house. His father's smile was the same as it always had been, warm and kind, but his eyes were always filled with something more, a knowing, a silent understanding that there was more to life than just ambition. Ambition, Daniel whispered to himself. What is it really? The question felt heavy, like a weight settling in his chest. He had spent the last 10 years building his tech company from nothing. And now, it was finally starting to pay off. Investors were knocking on his door. His app was gaining traction. People were starting to recognize his name in the industry. But as his success grew, so did the shadows. It started small, an offhand comment from an old friend, a warning from a mentor. Don't lose yourself in the process. Daniel, they'd said, not everyone who climbs the ladder does so with clean hands. At first, Daniel had brushed it off. He was focused, he was driven, he had a vision, and he wasn't going to let anyone or anything derail it. But now, as he sat in the quiet of his office, the weight of those words was pressing against him. He knew what they meant. It wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about the choices he had to make along the way. Every deal he struck, every decision he made, had its price, and he had started to wonder, who was he becoming in the process? It wasn't just the shady business practices that bothered him. It was the small compromises, the moments when he had chosen convenience over integrity. When he had pushed aside his values to get ahead, he could still hear the voice of his father, echoing in his mind, remember who you are. Son, never let the world change you. But it was hard to remember who he was when the world was constantly telling him to be someone else. Daniel's phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from one of his key investors. a man named Gregory who had supported the company from the very beginning. "We need to talk," the message read. "I've got a big opportunity for you. It's time to take things to the next level." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Gregory was a powerful man, a master of the corporate game. He had the connections, the resources, and the influence to take Daniel's company to places he had only dreamed of. But there was always a price. Gregory wasn't the type of man who believed in playing by the rules. He was ruthless, opportunistic, and he always got what he wanted. Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He knew this moment was coming. The question had been hanging over him for months now. What would he do when it was no longer just about hard work, but about choices? The kind of choices that changed the course of everything. He thought back to the first time he'd met Gregory. It had been at a small networking event, a gathering of young entrepreneurs eager to make their mark. Daniel had been nervous, unsure of himself, but Gregory had seen something in him. He'd seen potential, and from that moment on, he had been by Daniel's side, helping him navigate the treacherous waters of business. At first, it had all seemed so simple. Work hard, make the right connections, follow the path to success. But now, Daniel was starting to see the cracks in that path. He was starting to wonder if success was worth the cost. His phone buzzed again. The message was simple: "Meet me at 8. It's time." Daniel arrived at the upscale restaurant exactly at 8 p.m., just as Gregory had instructed. The place was a sanctuary of polished wood, soft jazz music, and the faint smell of expensive cologne lingering in the air. The hum of conversation around him seemed distant, almost irrelevant, as if everything here was an illusion, a carefully curated performance for people who lived behind masks. As he approached the private booth in the back, he saw Gregory already sitting there, a man of middle age with a presence that made the entire room seem to shrink in comparison. His black suit gleamed under the warm light, his fingers tapping rhythmically on a glass of whiskey. "Ah, Daniel, glad you could make it," Gregory said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Please, sit." Daniel slid into the seat across from him, trying to ignore the uncomfortable tension settling in his chest. He had been here before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the stakes were higher. "I've been thinking," Gregory began, leaning in slightly, his voice low and controlled. "You've done well so far. You've built something impressive. But, Daniel," he paused for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air. "You can't reach the top by playing nice. Not in this world." Daniel swallowed, his heart racing. He had heard these words before, but tonight, they felt heavier, more urgent. "I'm listening," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Gregory took a slow sip of his drink, watching Daniel carefully. "There's an opportunity on the table. A big one, but it's not for the faint of heart. To take it, you'll need to make a choice. A real choice." Daniel's mind raced. He had always known that there were no guarantees in business. Success was a fine line between brilliance and ruthlessness. But the thought of crossing that line, of truly embracing the darkness, had never been this tangible before. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Gregory smiled. It was the smile of a man who knew he had already won. "I'm talking about an acquisition. A major one. The kind of deal that would catapult your company into the stratosphere. We're talking about a partnership with some of the most powerful people in the industry. But to pull it off, you'll need to play by different rules." The words hung in the air, and Daniel felt the weight of them. He had heard whispers in the industry about these powerful figures, people who had no regard for ethics or integrity. They ruled by fear and manipulation, using their vast resources to control markets and people alike. But Gregory's proposition wasn't just about money, it was about power. Real, unbridled power. "What's the catch?" Daniel finally asked. Gregory leaned back, his fingers tapping on the rim of his glass. "The catch is simple. You'll have to make certain sacrifices. You'll have to abandon the idealistic vision you've been clinging to. The vision that says your company can grow while staying true to your values. You can't have both. Not at this level." Daniel stared at Gregory, the man's words sinking in like a stone in water. He had always believed that success didn't have to come at the cost of his integrity. That there was a way to build something meaningful, something that mattered. But now, it seemed as if that was nothing more than a dream, a fairy tale told to naive souls who didn't understand the brutal reality of the world they were living in. His mind began to swirl. On one side, there was the dream, the idealism of building something for the greater good. The kind of company his father would have been proud of. On the other, there was the raw power Gregory was offering, an opportunity to rule, to control, to shape the future on his terms. It was the very thing he had worked so hard for, the promise of everything he had ever wanted. But at what cost? Gregory continued, sensing the hesitation in Daniel's silence. You don't have to decide right now. Take your time, but I want you to know that opportunities like this don't come around often. And the longer you wait, the more others will get ahead. Trust me, Daniel, time is the one thing we can't get back. Daniel's thoughts were a whirlwind. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He was standing at the crossroads of his life, and every choice seemed to lead down a different path. But what if the path to power required sacrifices he wasn't ready to make? What if he couldn't live with the man he would become? The image of his father appeared in his mind, standing tall with a steady gaze. Never lose yourself, his father had always told him. But was it possible to keep one's soul intact in a world that demanded so much? You've got this, Daniel, Gregory said, his voice cutting through the chaos in Daniel's mind. You've built this company from the ground up. Now it's time to take it to the next level. Don't let fear or hesitation stop you. Daniel walked back to his apartment that night, the city lights casting eerie reflections on the pavement, distorting the world around him. His footsteps felt heavy, like they were dragging him through time itself, pulling him toward a future he wasn't sure he was ready for. The proposal from Gregory lingered in his mind like a dark cloud, blocking out everything else. The offer had been tempting, seductive even. Power, influence, wealth. It was everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed for. But was it enough? As he entered his apartment, he didn't even bother to turn on the lights. Instead, he sank into his couch, letting the silence of the room consume him. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, suffocating him in its intensity. He thought about his father's voice again. Never lose yourself, son. Stay true to who you are. But the truth was, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. The world of business, with its endless pursuit of profit and power, had changed him in ways he hadn't fully realized until now. The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and the ideals he once held so dear now seemed like childish fantasies. The temptation to take the deal with Gregory was overwhelming. After all, the road to success had always been paved with compromises. His mentors had warned him about this. It's not personal, Daniel, they'd said. It's just business. But was it? Could he truly build a company that mattered while sacrificing his values? Could he live with himself if he chose to chase power at any cost? The more Daniel thought about it, the more he realized that the answer wasn't as clear as he'd hoped. In the pursuit of success, he had already crossed several lines. The small compromises had begun to add up, choosing the easier path, overlooking the shady deals, ignoring the warnings of friends and colleagues who had said, "This isn't the person you were when you started." And yet, despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. The allure of power was too great. The possibility of becoming someone who could shape the world with a single decision too intoxicating. But there was something else, something deeper, that gnawed at him. The whispers in his mind had started again, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. You will choose. The voice was almost familiar now, like an old friend, or perhaps a long-lost part of himself that had been buried beneath years of ambition and success. But what did it mean? Who am I really? He whispered into the dark room. Am I just the sum of my decisions? Or is there more to me than that? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Startled, Daniel stood up quickly and walked toward the sound. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find his colleague and closest friend, Rachel, standing there. Her face was tired, but her eyes held a sharpness that cut through the fog in his mind. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Without waiting for a response, she stepped inside and sat down on the couch, motioning for Daniel to join her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, like a secret they both knew but weren't ready to share. Rachel had been with Daniel from the very beginning. She had seen the long nights, the setbacks, the small victories, and the slow climb to success. But she had also seen the changes in him, the subtle shifts in his behavior, the way he had started to prioritize power over people. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but filled with concern. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. You're about to make a decision that could change everything." Daniel sat down next to her, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what to do. Rachel, I've spent my entire life chasing this. I've sacrificed so much, and now, Gregory is offering me everything I've ever wanted. But I don't know if I can live with the cost." Rachel looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "What do you really want, Daniel? Is it the power, the money, or is it the chance to make a real difference? Because those two things don't always go together." Daniel didn't answer right away. The truth was, he didn't know anymore. Somewhere along the way, his vision of success had become clouded by the very things he had once despised. The promises of power and influence were blinding him to the very thing he had wanted when he first started, the chance to create something that mattered. Something that could help people. Something that could stand the test of time. Rachel's voice broke through his thoughts again. "You can't serve two masters. Daniel, you can't serve your ambition and your values at the same time. So, you need to decide, which one do you want more?" Daniel stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He knew she was right. He had been living in the grey area for far too long, convincing himself that he could have both. But the reality was, he couldn't, not anymore. He had to choose. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt the full force of what that choice meant. It wasn't just about business or success. It was about who he was as a person, what kind of man he wanted to be. The voices in his head, both the angel and the demon, had been fighting for dominance. But now, for the first time, he felt like he was standing on the edge of something far greater than any deal or acquisition. It was the beginning of his own soul's reckoning. The next few days were a blur for Daniel. The offer from Gregory haunted him at every turn. It wasn't just the possibility of immense wealth and power that kept him awake at night. It was the overwhelming sense that he was standing at the precipice of a decision that would define him forever. Every conversation, every interaction seemed to revolve around it. His colleagues had noticed the change in him, the way he had become more withdrawn, less focused. Even Rachel, who had always been his sounding board, seemed distant, watching him with an air of quiet concern that he couldn't quite shake. But no matter how many times he turned the offer over in his mind, the answer remained elusive. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, suffocating his every thought. One evening, Daniel found himself alone in his office, the city lights flickering outside the window. It was late, too late for anyone else to be around. The office, once a place of inspiration and productivity, now felt empty, as if it were just another hollow shell waiting to be filled. He took out his phone and stared at the message from Gregory that had been sitting there for days. Untouched. "It's time, Daniel. You've built this, but now it's time to take it further. I'm offering you the world. Don't waste it." The words echoed in his mind, but they didn't carry the same weight they once did. In fact, they felt empty, like the hollow promises of someone who had already seen the cost of power and was trying to drag Daniel into the same abyss. A sudden thought struck him. Could he really walk away from it all? Could he give up everything he had worked for? The late nights, the sacrifices, the years of labor and determination. Was he ready to throw it all away because of some idealistic notion of ethics and integrity? He closed his eyes, letting out a long, slow breath. He had always prided himself on being different, on staying true to the values his father had instilled in him. But the world was never as simple as that, was it? The buzz of his phone brought him back to reality. It was Rachel again. Her message was short. "We need to talk." Daniel's heart sank. He knew what this was about. She had seen the change in him, and now she was coming to confront him. He had been avoiding this conversation for days, knowing deep down that he wasn't prepared to face the truth. But tonight, there was no escaping it. He responded, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. When he arrived at the small cafe they had frequented for years, he found Rachel already sitting at a corner table. She was staring out the window, lost in thought, but when she saw him, she gave a small, tired smile. "I've been waiting for you," she said softly as he sat down. There was a heaviness in her eyes, a sadness that made Daniel feel guilty for not coming to her sooner. He had always relied on Rachel for guidance, for perspective, but now, he was afraid of what she might say. "Rachel," he began, his voice low, "I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads." She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I know. And I'm worried about you. Daniel, you're not the same person you were when we first started this journey. I can see it in your eyes. You're losing yourself in this pursuit of success." Daniel's chest tightened. Her words hit harder than he expected. She was right. He had been so consumed with building something meaningful, something powerful, that he had forgotten why he started in the first place. "I've worked so hard for this," he whispered, the weight of his words hitting him as he said them aloud. "Everything I've done, all the sacrifices, they've all been for this moment, for this opportunity, and now, it's right in front of me." Rachel leaned forward, her voice soft but insistent. "But at what cost, Daniel? Do you even recognize the person you're becoming? Gregory's offer is tempting, but it's not worth losing yourself. You've been chasing something that isn't real." The words stung, but Daniel didn't argue. Deep down, he knew she was right. He had become so obsessed with the end goal, with the idea of success, that he had stopped considering what kind of man he was becoming along the way. "I don't want to lose everything," he said, his voice cracking, "but I'm afraid that if I don't take this deal, I'll never get another chance. It's now or never." Rachel's expression softened. "And what if never isn't as bad as you think? What if you can still build something real, without compromising who you are? Success is more than just the money or the power. It's about what you stand for." Daniel's mind raced, and he realized that he was finally at the point where he needed to confront the truth. The world of business was built on a foundation of power, manipulation, and ruthlessness, but that didn't mean he had to play by its rules. He could still choose a different path, a path that didn't involve sacrificing his soul. As he sat there, facing Rachel's unwavering gaze, Daniel finally understood. The decision wasn't just about the company, the deal, or the success. It was about who he wanted to be. And in that moment, he realized that he couldn't live with himself if he chose the path that Gregory was offering. There was something greater than success, something worth more than all the power in the world, the integrity to look at himself in the mirror and know that he had stayed true to who he was. The morning after his conversation with Rachel, Daniel woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The weight of the decision that had been suffocating him for days seemed to lift, if only slightly. As he walked into his kitchen, his eyes fell on the coffee mug his father had once used. It was a small, simple thing, just a plain white cup with no embellishments. But to Daniel, it represented everything he had tried to build: honesty, simplicity, integrity. He reached for it without thinking, as if doing so might somehow center him, ground him in what mattered most. As the coffee brewed, Daniel's mind wandered back to Gregory's offer. For a moment, he entertained the idea of just accepting it. What was the harm? It was the price of doing business, right? Everyone in the industry did it. Everyone compromised to get ahead. But that wasn't who he was anymore. The thought of accepting Gregory's deal, of becoming another cog in the system of corruption and deceit, made his stomach churn. He knew that if he went down that path, it would change him in ways he couldn't predict. He would become someone he didn't recognize, a man who had lost himself to the pursuit of power and wealth. And he wasn't ready to make that choice. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from Rachel. "You made the right choice. I'm proud of you." Her words brought a small, bittersweet smile to his face. Rachel had always been there for him, through the highs and lows. And now, more than ever, he realized that her unwavering support had been the anchor that kept him grounded when the world around him was trying to pull him under. But there was still the matter of the decision. Despite his newfound resolve, Daniel knew the consequences of turning down Gregory's offer wouldn't be easy. The industry was ruthless, and people like Gregory didn't take rejection lightly. There would be fallout, there always was. But Daniel wasn't willing to compromise his soul. Not anymore. He wasn't willing to become another puppet in a game of shadows. The next day, Daniel called Gregory to set up a meeting. It wasn't the call he wanted to make, but it was the one he needed to. As much as he had wanted to avoid it, he knew he had to face the consequences of his choice head-on. Gregory wasn't the kind of man who would simply accept rejection without repercussions. The meeting took place in the same upscale restaurant where they had first discussed the deal. This time, however, the air felt different. The warmth of the evening's ambience couldn't mask the cold tension that hung between them. Daniel sat across from Gregory, his heart pounding in his chest. Gregory didn't waste any time. "I've been expecting this," Gregory said, his voice calm, Yet there was a certain edge to it. I knew you'd back out. I told you this would happen. You can't climb to the top without making sacrifices. Daniel's throat tightened, but he met Gregory's gaze without flinching. I've thought about it, and I can't do it. I won't be a part of that world. Not at the cost of everything I believe in. Gregory's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. How noble, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can escape the price of success? Daniel swallowed, his fists clenched beneath the table. He had known this moment would come, but hearing Gregory say those words made it all feel so real. The world they inhabited was a world of power, manipulation, and intimidation, and Daniel had just chosen to walk away from it. You can't afford to be idealistic. Daniel, Gregory continued, this isn't about values or integrity. This is about survival. In this world, you either play the game, or you get left behind. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. Maybe I'm okay with being left behind. Maybe I'm not willing to sacrifice my soul for success. I'd rather stay true to who I am. Gregory's smile faded, and for the first time, Daniel saw the man's mask slip. The calm, controlled persona faltered for just a moment, revealing something darker beneath. You don't know what you're up against. Daniel, this isn't a game you can just walk away from. There are people who will make sure of that. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Gregory wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was warning him that the world Daniel was trying to leave behind wouldn't let him go so easily. Daniel's resolve hardened. He had already made his choice, and he wasn't going to back down now. I'm not afraid of you, Gregory. I'm not afraid of anyone. There was a long pause as the two men stared at each other across the table. Gregory was silent for a moment, the weight of Daniel's words hanging in the air. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if coming to some internal decision. You'll regret this, Gregory said softly, his voice now almost eerily calm. But we all have our choices to make. Daniel stood up, feeling the finality of the moment settle over him. He wasn't going to allow himself to be manipulated any longer. He wasn't going to be a puppet in Gregory's game. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it. As he turned to leave, he felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the peace of certainty, it was the peace that came from knowing he had made the right choice. No matter the consequences, the decision to walk away from Gregory's deal was just the beginning. Daniel knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. He had chosen the path of integrity, the path that aligned with who he truly was, and no matter what the world threw at him, he was ready to face it head-on. Weeks passed, and the storm that had raged within Daniel began to subside. He had made his choice, but the aftermath was not as simple as he had hoped. The world he had known, the high-stakes world of business, the cutthroat corporate games, hadn't just let him walk away. There were consequences, some of which were expected, others far more insidious. The first few days after his rejection of Gregory's offer were peaceful, almost serene. It was a strange feeling, like walking out of a suffocating storm into clear skies. He started to rebuild, not his company, but his life. He poured himself into his work. Yes, but not with the same frantic energy that had once consumed him. He focused on the things that truly mattered, his values, his principles, and his relationship with the people who had always been there for him. Rachel remained his anchor throughout this time. She was there, offering her quiet support and gentle guidance, reminding him daily that he had made the right decision. She never pressured him, never asked him to explain why he had chosen this path. She simply stood by him, a constant source of strength. But despite the peace he felt internally, the external world was anything but calm. Gregory's threat had not been an idle one. Daniel had expected some pushback, but the extent of it shocked him. The pressure started slowly, subtle at first. Small things, clients pulling out of deals, partners getting cold feet, and even employees questioning his leadership. The whispers of discontent grew louder by the day, and Daniel realized that Gregory was pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to dismantle everything he had worked for. But Daniel didn't flinch. He couldn't. He had made a promise to himself. He wouldn't compromise. He wouldn't let fear drive his actions. And he certainly wouldn't let the shadows of the past dictate his future. The challenges were real. Clients and partners that had once trusted him now turned their backs. Daniel faced accusations of incompetence, of making irrational decisions. His reputation, once built on integrity and hard work, was being torn apart in the public eye. He found himself under constant scrutiny, with reporters digging into his past, questioning every move he made. But amid the chaos, something remarkable happened. A few weeks into the storm, an old friend, Adam, reached out to Daniel. Adam had been one of the first people to ever believe in him. Back when Daniel was just starting out in the business world, they had lost touch over the years, as Adam had taken a different path in life, away from the corporate hustle. But now, Adam was back, offering help when Daniel needed it the most. "I've been watching you, Daniel," Adam said when they met. "I see what you're trying to do, and I know it's not easy, but I believe in what you're building. I want to help." It was a lifeline that Daniel hadn't expected but desperately needed. Adam brought in investors who were aligned with Daniel's vision, people who valued integrity over profits, who saw the long-term worth of building something meaningful rather than chasing quick gains. Together, they slowly began to rebuild the company, step by step, brick by brick. But even with Adam's support, the struggle wasn't over. Gregory's influence remained, a shadow looming over every decision. The constant pressure took its toll on Daniel's personal life. Rachel, though still supportive, began to show signs of fatigue. The tension between them grew, not because of a lack of love, but because of the weight of the world pressing down on them both. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Daniel," Rachel confessed one evening. "I know you're doing the right thing, but I'm scared. I'm scared of losing you to this fight. I'm scared of what it's doing to you." Daniel held her close, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. The battle he had chosen was one of immense sacrifice. It wasn't just his career on the line, it was his relationship, his mental and emotional well-being, and the very essence of who he was. But he couldn't back down. Not now, not after everything he had been through. "I'm not giving up on us, Rachel," he whispered, "but I can't give up on this either. I can't let him win. We're building something real, something worth fighting for, and I need you to stand with me." Rachel didn't reply immediately. For a long time, there was silence between them. But finally, she nodded. "Then we'll face it together. I'll be here, no matter what happens." The following months were a whirlwind of late nights, sleepless hours, and intense battles. But with each passing day, Daniel grew more confident in his decision. He could see the small victories. His team rallied around him. Investors who believed in his vision stuck with him. And slowly, his reputation began to mend. And then, one day, out of the blue, Gregory made contact again. The message was simple, almost cordial. "I see you've made your way back. It's impressive, but let me make one thing clear. Daniel, this isn't over. I'll always be watching, and I'll never forget." Daniel read the message with a calm resolve. He didn't feel fear. He didn't feel anger. He simply felt nothing. He had already won. He had chosen the light. In the end, Daniel learned something that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. True success wasn't defined by the power he held, the wealth he accumulated, or the recognition he received. True success was about the choices he made, the integrity he upheld, and the legacy he left behind. It was about staying true to himself, no matter the cost. As he looked out the window of his office, the city sprawling beneath him, Daniel smiled. He had faced the darkness, had resisted its pull, and had chosen the light. And that light was brighter than any power or wealth he could have ever imagined.